Hello? Is this thing on? Hi. Welcome to our inaugural edition of WDBC Internet TV. I'm Michael P. Borgia. The borgcast, as always originating from deep behind enemy lines, is brought to you by dailyborg.com. Conservative politics for the thoughtful. Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. Well, as a subject for our first video podcast, I thought we'd take a look back at how our magnificent 7 Senate candidates are doing. We profiled them on our Republican page a few weeks ago. The 7 Tea Party candidates who upset establishment favorites and are now actually leading or tied in their battle against hardcore Democrats. We start in Utah. Mike Lee, a businessman from that state, was the first of the Tea Party favorites to score a big upset when he took out longtime Senator Robert Bennett at his state's Republican convention, where the results are binding. Lee and one other Tea Party candidate made it onto a primary ballot, and Senator Bennett was left to begin cleaning out his office. Now, Senator Orrin Hatch came to Delaware for a fundraiser for Mike Castle some months ago and warned that if Bennett wasn't renominated, we were just about giving this seat away to the Democrats. Well, as it turns out, Lee, the Tea Party guy, is playing quite well. He's 25 points ahead of his Democratic opponent so far. Next, we move on to Kentucky. Rand Paul was the next Tea Party candidate to take out an establishment favorite when he defeated Secretary of State Trey Grayson. They call Paul a kook, and Paul didn't help himself very much early on when he repeatedly put his foot in his mouth, making various misstatements and gaffes during the June time period. But Paul seems to have stabilized his mouth and his polls. He's running 11 points ahead of Democratic Attorney General Jack Conway, who himself was an upset winner in Kentucky. Up in Alaska, Joe Miller, he was the biggest upset winner, at least at the time that he was nominated back in August, when he upset the second generation of a political dynasty in that state. He booted Senator Lisa Murkowski. Now, Murkowski is elected to stay in the contest as a write-in candidate, and polls here are all over the place. There's one local poll that shows she has an 11-point lead over Miller. But the Gold Standard Rasmussen survey shows Miller up by 15, 42 to 27. Down at the other end of the country, about as far away as you can get from Alaska and still be in the United States, that takes us to Florida. Marco Rubio was one of the most loved of the Tea Party darlings, and at first didn't seem like he had much chance. People were talking about Rubio as the future. But then as time went by and polls came in later and later on, Rubio seemed more and more like the present, eventually pulling even with Governor Charlie Crist, then pulling ahead of him, and then further ahead, and further still. After a while, Crist lost contact with Rubio altogether and decided he would run as an independent, abandoning the Republican primary. They'll meet again. They'll meet in the general election, and at this point it still looks like Crist is having trouble seeing Rubio out the front windshield, and Rubio appears to be losing contact with Crist in the rearview mirror. Rasmussen says Rubio leads by 11. In Pennsylvania, Pat Toomey drove Arlen Specter out of the Republican Party last year because after barely surviving a primary challenge 6 years ago against Toomey, Specter realized he wasn't going to beat him this time. Specter, of course, was eventually beaten by Democrat Joe Sestak. So it's Sestak versus Toomey in November, and Toomey has stretched to a 9-point lead over Sestak. In Colorado, Ken Buck upset the establishment favorite Jane Norton, first in a convention and then again in the primary. And Buck looks like he's in good shape to defeat the appointed incumbent Michael Bennett. We're showing Buck 4 points ahead according to the latest Rasmussen survey. Lastly, Sharon Angle in Nevada. Now she's showing, according to Rasmussen, running 1 point behind Harry Reid, essentially nominated with the support of Nevada's various Tea Parties, which in turn received quite a bit of funding from Senator Reid himself to help push Angle over the top. Angle has remained competitive despite, like Rand Paul, making a disastrous series of mistakes early in the campaign. But she stabilized the situation, erased a small deficit, and is running just about even with him. Rasmussen shows her 1 point down. A Fox poll released yesterday shows she's 3 points ahead. So Harry Reid could become the second Democratic Senate leader in just 6 years to be defeated. on Election Day. That's the Magnificent Seven. Now, there is still one Tea Party darling out there who would like to turn this into an Elite Eight, but the most recent polling in Delaware shows Christine O'Donnell still has some work to do. Witchcraft or not, she's 11 points down to Democrat Chris Coons. Now, can she win? Well, yes, she can, and there is an electoral math that makes that possible. Check out Daily Borg's archive pages to see how our math shows that Christine O'Donnell can still come up a winner on Election Day. A little less than 4 weeks to go. Things are starting to get exciting. You have been assimilated.